In 1999, Morpheus offered Neo a choice between a red pill and a blue pill. In 2018, this country fractured between red and blue. In 2022, I'm here to tell you that if you really want the truth, more voters are neither red or blue. Yet, they have no representation, no choice, and no options. They have to choose between candidates chosen by the red people or the blue people. I'm David Esrati, and I'm running for Congress as an American, as in red, white, and blue. I'm a veteran, an activist, and a small businessman. I'm asking you to join me in reminding the professional politicians in Congress who their bosses are. I support ranked choice voting, campaign finance reform, and a verified voter information system, all so we can stop having the best politicians money can buy. It's time to elect a veteran who will work for you, no matter what color they want to label you. Please go to electesrati.com and learn more. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. In Jurassic Park, you thought those little baby dinosaurs were cute until they turned into out-of-control carnivores. That's sort of what happens to government when we elect people based on very expensive advertising campaigns and propaganda. I'm David Esrati. I'm a veteran and a small businessman running for Congress. You don't want professional ad people and pollsters to sway your vote. All those hot-button issues like gun control, abortion, borders are all politicized to stop you from voting rationally. And thinking rationally seems to be in short supply these days. Most Americans have been voting against their own best self-interest for a long time because we've allowed money to buy our leaders. 1 million Americans died in the last 2 years because our leaders couldn't lead. It wasn't that hard. Mask, distance, test, and then vaccinate. In an instant, we had billions to spend on healthcare for COVID, when for years we've been told we can't provide healthcare for everyone equally in this country. That's an unintended consequence of the pandemic. If you think about it, our government can pretty much do whatever it wants, or what the people who buy our politicians tell our leaders to do. We also had a ton of money to prop up businesses. And next thing you know, it turns out that a living wage was not only possible, but necessary. As a small businessman who won't sell you out to corporate interests and lobbyists, I can tell you that it's time to fully understand the consequences of companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Google and their effect on small business, and to remind you that small business is the #1 creator of jobs in this country. So this next election, don't trust this ad or any other political ad. Do your homework and think before you vote. It's time to put this ad man in Congress because I know that the best advertising is based on the truth, not the size of the budget or payola. Or you can just vote based on who has the money to buy their way into Congress and live with the consequences. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. Hi, I'm David Esrati, and I'm running for Congress in OH-10, which is all of Montgomery County, all of Greene County, and and parts of Clark County. And if you don't know where any of those counties are, Dayton, Ohio is probably the biggest community. Second is Springfield, which is in Clark, which is only a part of it, but there you go. And I'm going to tell people on Facebook, I cannot see the comment thread today if you comment on Facebook. So jump over to YouTube at tinyurl.com/Esrati Live if you want to make a comment. Today we are talking about what Joe Biden did yesterday, pardoning people for federal pot possession violations. And we are talking about medical marijuana and the politics involved in recreational marijuana as well. First and foremost, I grew up with listening to Nancy Reagan saying, just say no, and the big war on drugs, which never really worked, did it? And while I have never been somebody who wanted to go and smoke pot or hang out with people smoking pot, I've never had a problem with people doing that. I find people who smoke pot less revolting than people who get drunk and do stupid things and then go drive. I have a real problem with that. However, alcohol is legal. And when I grew up, you could buy 3-2 beer when you turned 18, and then they later raised it to age 21, which I found kind of crazy because you can join the military at 18, but you can't get a beer. And in fact, at the time on base, if you were in the military, and even if you were under 18, and there were a few of them, you could drink. Now, alcohol is just fine and dandy according to the government, and they make lots of money taxing the hell out of sales of alcohol. Taxing is what this is all about. And having the best politicians money can buy, because a lot of them get their money from, guess who? The people who sell alcohol, who sell pharmaceuticals, who sell tobacco. There is no use from tobacco. Okay? There is no medical use for tobacco. It's just an addictive, horrible, nasty habit. And it's legal. And while you're not supposed to sell cigarettes to, on someone under 18, we went ahead and let vapes start and let them sell to kids under 18, even though they weren't supposed to, and then market to them, and then retract all that. And we're talking about delivering nicotine, which is a highly addictive substance. I know people who are potheads. Are they addicted to pot? Are they sitting there, I can't live without pot? No. Can you say the same about tobacco? No, they need their tobacco. They go through withdrawal if they don't have that. But again, tobacco industry rules. So what we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years is both big alcohol and big tobacco diversifying into pot. Why are they diversifying into pot? Because it's all about money. It's not about creating better booze, creating better cigarettes. It's about making money. And the big companies have the jump on this because they own lobbyists who then own congressmen. So in case you didn't know, Altria, the big tobacco people, agreed to buy a 45% in the Canadian cannabinoid company, Kronos Group, for about $1.8 billion in 2018. Altria, big tobacco, buying into Canadian pot. Weed-infused beverages are now popping up, and Pabst Blue Ribbon and Constellation have already pushed into that market. Unlike CBD-infused drinks that have been more widely available, these drinks contain the psychoactive component tetrahydrocannabinoid, or THC. You're going to live or you're going to die. Get it out. All right. And so it gets people high, and it's still federally prohibited in the United States, but they're already ready. As soon as it becomes legal, they'll have pot-infused booze. Okay? We are talking about big money. And how big is it? How about these stats? When they looked at cannabis legislation in the U.S., both medical and recreational, since '96, the findings revealed stock market returns for pharmaceutical companies dropped by an average of nearly 2% following any cannabis legalization event. Across all pharma companies, the researchers estimated that this equaled a drop in annual drug sales of around $3 billion for each individual legalization event. You're going to raise hell about $3 billion, I would imagine, if you were a pharmaceutical company person. So, speculating in the future, they calculate nearly 11% drop in total annual pharmaceutical sales if medical cannabis was legalized in the 16 U.S. states yet to make the leap. This equates to a $38 billion drop in drug sales. And that's just based on broader access to medical cannabis, not the recreational. Pfizer is to enter the medical cannabis industry, betting on a promising cannabinoid-based bowel disease treatment, and they invested money into a biotech company called Arena Pharmaceuticals, and they acquired all the shares at $100 a share. I think the whole deal was worth about total value $6.7 billion. Why? Because guess what? Cannabis is a natural drug, and it does some pretty incredible things. If Average Joe was here, he would tell you how it saved him $4,000 a month on Humira, a pharmaceutical solution for Crohn's disease, or it's Crohn's or IBS? What? Colitis on his colitis. $4,000 a month down to medical marijuana, which is dirt cheap, a couple $100 a month. And it would be cheaper if the Ohio legislature hadn't divvied out the licenses basically to white people. Just 8 of the 58 dispensaries are minority owned. How does that happen? So I see that Jennifer has piped in that she can afford a bottle of Jack for my multiple sclerosis pain. I can't afford to keep paying for an Ohio medical marijuana card and then for the medical marijuana because it's overpriced. Okay? We have a serious problem in this country. We are letting people get rich off of people getting sick. We are willing to prosecute African Americans 3.73 times more often for marijuana possession than white people, even though the use is the same across all races. They call it staggering racial bias. How does that happen? How do we end up with so many black people in jail for possession? And the thing about Biden's pardon was it was for federal charges, and most people get state charges. Again, we're having this big fight between states' rights and federal rights. And the states are all saying, oh, we should take care of everything. Home rule. Oh, us. We have that authority to do this. And what that ends up creating is an absolute hodgepodge of stupid laws that don't line up between states and don't make sense and usually are enacted in really rigged states like Ohio, where the Republicans have a supermajority thanks to the Koch brothers' work over 2 decades ago, where they decided to see if they could fix things so they're all Republicans in there, and they did a really good job of it. So, what should we be doing about, let's say, vapes, tobacco products, alcohol, and marijuana? Well, it's pretty obvious that vapes should need a prescription and only be used for people who are quitting cigarettes. That would be number 1. Number 2, maybe we need to have doctors prescribe cigarettes, where you have to pay a doctor to see a doctor to continue smoking or to get your initial card, just like marijuana. So you can't just go into the gas station and buy cigarettes unless you have already been proven to be a nicotine addict. We need to stop the beginnings of it, because once they get hooked, they're done. So having a medical doctor be the gatekeeper for tobacco would be a great first step, because it will save literally the people tens of thousands of dollars over their lifetimes wasted on cigarettes, number 1. And 2, the healthcare system won't be burdened with your sick ass after your lungs are shot. You've got all the other diseases related to smoking, and cut down on the amount of cancer. Why not? As to alcohol, well, I'm hoping self-driving cars will be the solution so you drunks don't drive home from the bars and crash into people. We need to actually start having personal responsibility for being drunk and driving. It's not working so well when you get guys that have had 4 or 5 DUIs and they're still driving. So maybe there's got to be a different way to address this. I see a new commenter here. We got Jerry Deere asking, why not regulate the prices hospitals and doctors can charge for anything, including pharmaceuticals? That would keep healthcare costs down and eliminate the power of the insurance companies. Well, I have already said that most hospitals get a majority of their money from the federal government. And the first thing we need to do is start regulating their CEO pay and say you are not going to operate as a not-for-profit or a non-profit if you're paying your CEO more than, say, 10 times what you pay your average employee. Not your high paid, your average. So we stop this insanity of paying hospital executives millions of dollars. Secondly, I don't believe in health insurance. I think health insurance is a fraud. I think we should have health care for everybody. We don't need to pay people to tell us what and tell doctors what they can and cannot do and charge 35%. Those are grifters on the system, and we have legitimized them, and we've made a mess of it, and we are unhealthier because of it. So I, have no problems with regulating prices. The VA has done it. They buy medications, they buy medical instruments, they buy supplies way cheaper than what you are charged anywhere else. For example, a friend of mine who is an audiologist went to work for the VA, and he got there and he was just dumbstruck because the same hearing aid that he had to sell for about $5,000 or $6,000 in order to make money as an audiologist on the private side, the VA bought for $380. Same exact thing. And they were handing them out to veterans left and right. Because when you buy 100,000 hearing aids or 100,000 CPAPs, guess what kind of prices you can get? So, I have no problem at all fixing the healthcare industry. It's quite simple. Now, for all those of you who say, I don't want the government running anything, the government runs a whole lot of things and does a better job than you expect. I mean, how often do we have planes crashing in midair? The FAA manages to take care of that. How often do we have drugs or, breaking out with mass disease that's regulated through the Food and Drug Administration? They do a pretty good job of inspections. Now, during the Trump administration, they cut some of those things back. Could have been better. But hospitals, there was one thing Trump did, and the hospitals sort of negated instantly. He insisted that they publish prices. And you were supposed to be able to comparison shop. Of course, nobody could. And we have in-network prices, out-of-network prices, published prices, actual prices, Medicare prices. If I ran my business like that, I'd be in trouble. If I sold hardware and I had to see your insurance card to come in and find out which insurance company you were with, you'd get one price. If you got it from another, you were another price. If you didn't have insurance, it was 10 times as much. I'd be in trouble. Only in America do we do this crap. So we can fix that. But back to pharmaceuticals, and thanks for tuning in, Jerry. And back to pharmaceuticals. We have to figure out a way to normalize some of these things. For instance, the COVID vaccines. We invested billions before COVID in research on mRNA vaccines. It just so happened when COVID came up, that was the best thing available. And the company that made the most money out of it, the two, Moderna and Pfizer, took work that was paid for by the public, open source work, discoveries, and then privatized it and sold us back and made a killing on it. Absolute killing. There is no reason these people who had been funded in all their research should have been able to capitalize the way they did. You shouldn't become an instant billionaire because there's a pandemic and your firm used a bunch of stuff paid for by the public to solve the problem. We should have nationalized the vaccine, and that should have been that. Speaking of the vaccine, the VA today didn't have the new booster. They were out and failed to tell anybody. Good job, guys. Usually I'm pretty happy with you, but today I wasn't too happy. So, what about the legal implications of people who have been charged with drug crimes at a state level now? Well, I don't see the state of Ohio moving forward in pardoning anybody because we've got hardcore people at the helm. It doesn't do them any good to help black people out. That's not their goal. Black people don't pay for them to get into office. And that's how Mike DeWine and the Republicans in the state of Ohio roll. They have granted medical marijuana cultivation retail licenses to some really wealthy people. Trust me, I know a few of them. They are making a killing, and they are kicking money back to keep those people in power. Used to be anybody could grow some weed in their basement. I have a friend of my father's who, one of the key selling features of his house when was a whole garden underneath the front deck that set with grow lights and everything. And that was in the 80s, early 80s. Pot is not that hard to grow. It's not that hard to cultivate. It's not hard to sell it and share it with your friends. It's not that hard to make it into pot chocolate, pot brownies, all these things. Why are we restricting it to the extent we are? Why do we have to put people and license it and everything else? Why do we do it with distilleries as well? It's all about tax collection, people. It's not about anything else. Think about it. And think about how is this country going to survive if all we have left is tattoo shops, yoga studios, personal trainers, distilleries, food, gourmet food trucks, and pot bakeries. I mean, what happened to us making things important things without the government getting heavily involved, like building computer chips or, trying to pull people like NCR to Georgia, or, the whole thing about getting Honda to build cars in Ohio in a cornfield. I mean, at some point, why doesn't the government get out of this, quote, economic development, investment into businesses if we really do believe in the invisible hand and we're not a bunch of, socialists? I just don't understand how we're picking and choosing the winners in the pot business. So, what Biden did was a stunt, much the same as what DeSantis did, sending immigrants up to Martha's Vineyard. The reality is, he probably is going to be sending planes up to Martha's Vineyard to bring those people back to put the roofs back on his houses in Florida after Hurricane Ian. Short-sighted there, Governor DeSantis. Maybe if you thought a little bit about things, you would understand that we are an entire country of immigrants, and there are some jobs that Americans just don't seem to want to do. Like pick strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, grapes, cotton. It goes down the line, or roof houses, or dig ditches. We need to figure out a system and solutions to that as well. I don't see any other questions here. Has anybody else got any insight on medical marijuana or about clearing their history after they've been arrested on a marijuana arrest? I mean, I know the military is now overlooking marijuana arrests and just making sure you've pissed clean. I don't know what the military solution is going to be as medical marijuana is legalized and what they're going to do. There's also the question about impairment when driving, because there is no, as we know it right now, a test to say you were impaired and caused an accident because you were high as a kite. So, They're going to have to figure some of those things out. What happens if you have an employee at work who's on medical marijuana running a high-speed manufacturing processing machine, and they are a little too stoned and they reach in and mangle their hand? Are you liable for that? Should that person have been working in that job while high? I mean, the doctor prescribed it. So we've got all kinds of questions that are still going to need to be answered and things that are going to need to be worked out. I don't have all the answers, but I can say this patchwork of different marijuana laws across the states, the problems with using financial institutions in this country to deposit money because you are breaking federal law if you're engaged in trade of marijuana, even if you're legal. This stuff all needs to be straightened out at the federal level. We need to legalize it across the country, at least for medical. Leave recreational up to the states, possibly. And I'm going to tell you, there are people that will move to one state or another based on their marijuana laws. That is a true fact. And then we need to look at what we do with all the people we've improperly arrested and ruined their lives over time because of these draconian laws we've got. I see Bill Mavar says, tough to act on MJ when the state pushes on the OB testing for workers' compensation rates. Workers' compensation in Ohio is bizarre. It's not really insurance. It's just a ploy to take money, as is unemployment. And that's something probably for another time to discuss. I'm looking at the time. It's been fun. It's been real. A couple things to tell you about. I am going to try to be tomorrow at the Yellow Springs Street Fair. And I'm thinking about taking t-shirts out there and having them at a special price. Cash only. I don't know how I'm going to manage credit cards out there. But do that and meet with voters and everything else. I will not be on the Truman podcast on this Sunday. It'll be the following Sunday. I was wrong yesterday if you were following along. And next week, I do not have any candidates events. So if you've got a group meeting and you'd like to talk to a future congressman, let me know and I will come on out. The following week, we've got a couple events. But if you need a yard sign, now's the time to go to the website and ask for one. If you want to come and volunteer and go door to door, now is the time to do that. If you want to pick the Reach Up app up and enter in all your friends and family and get that going, now's the time to do that too. And Jennifer says, the doctor that I got my 100 Ohio MJ card was a joke if they had to hand them out to anyone in 5 insurance if you fork over the money. Yeah. It became another way that doctors made some money, was issuing medical marijuana cards. I got interviewed by the Dayton Daily News reporter Josh Swigert today after he was done with his questions, which were pretty mediocre. I said, for an investigative reporter, you're not asking any good questions. And he took it kind of like, well, what should I be asking? I said, well, how about all the things about me that you've never written about, like my FOIA lawsuit, my BOE lawsuit, things I've been doing on the side, like reconstructingdayton.org, where we're talking about Unigov, talking about the Modern Policy Institute, which none of these have made any news or talked about, and how, we talked about a few other things that I've been doing that they don't know about and they don't care. It's up to you guys to help spread the word, and I really appreciate you tuning in and watching. But this election it's all going to be about who turns out to vote and who votes for basically the right to have an abortion in this country. So I expect women to get out and vote straight D ticket, and hopefully that will maneuver the Democratic Party that seems to think that there are some good Ds and bad Ds because they don't have a clue on how to win elections. So, again, if you want to have a topic for the next show, put it in the comments. I read all the comments. I respond. If you'd like to be a guest on this show, let us know. We can do that too. If you got something you want to talk about that's relevant, I'm still trying to work on a few people to come on. And I thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend. Hopefully see you at the Yellow Springs Street Festival.